Cool. Thank you so much, Jason. So, um, the biggest failure of my writing career started when I was invited to sit in on a Dungeons and Dragons session. Um, but this wasn't just any D&D session. This was a session of Critical Role. For those of you who don't know, Critical Role is a web series where a bunch of really well-known voice actors, who are also just kind of friends, they would get together and they would play Dungeons and Dragons. And this series was kind of a big deal. Millions of people tune in to watch the live stream. It was actually in the middle of being adapted into an Amazon Prime TV show, and members of the cast were each launching major projects. Like, Laura Bailey, one of the cast members, she just finished working on The Last of Us as one of the main cast members. So this was this really cool opportunity. I was the first journalist who'd actually ever been asked to sit in on a live session, and I was going to be allowed to conduct one-on-one interviews with every cast member. Um, the problem was I actually wasn't really that big of a fan of the show. I didn't really know very much about it. My video producer was the fan. He was the one who secured us the invitations. And I jumped at the chance because I knew that the opportunity was great. But I didn't really have a very strong opinion about Critical Role. But, I thought this is not a problem. I'm going to do a bunch of research. I'm going to read about them a lot. I'm going to, watch a bunch of live streams, recorded episodes from the past. I'm just going to make sure that I take tons of notes when I get there, and a story is going to emerge surely. So, flash forward to the trip. I fly out to Burbank with my producer. We're working out of the CBS offices. We're meeting a bunch of producers that are kind of like big deals, people whose careers I've followed. We go out to lunch and we get seated next to a bunch of the cast members of Game of Thrones, uh, which was like kind of in the middle of its heyday. I'm feeling a little bit starstruck and kind of overwhelmed, and we haven't even gotten to the studio yet. So, we go to the studio, we get to sit in on this episode, and these episodes are long. They're, 3, 4 hours. And so we're sitting just off camera, getting to observe kind of in real time as this episode is getting recorded. And then the next morning, we come back and we get to shoot portraits with every cast member. I do lengthy interviews with each one individually. And then afterwards, we actually get three of the main cast members on camera to do an on camera interview. We do this 30-minute interview, and this is just shaping up to be a great package of content. We're going to have images, we're going to have video, we're going to have a great written article. This is just going to be awesome, right? I'm super excited. So we finish up our second day, we're driving back to the airport, and something goes wrong. The camera that we used for all of the pictures and for at least part of the interview gets damaged. We lose all of our portraits. We lose half the sound for the interview. All of the visual assets, everything that we gathered over 2 days are gone like that. And my producer is obviously crushed, but I assure him, I'm like, I still think we can write this story. We can pull this together. We were there. I've got a lot of notes. So we go home, we fly back, and I grab my notebook that I've filled up with notes, and I sit down in front of my laptop and I'm staring at this blank screen, and I realize that after multiple days of going through this experience, I don't actually have anything to say. I mean, I can describe the rooms, I can describe the people, the props I got to hold, and all of that, but I don't actually have any real point to make. So I work on this article over the course of a week. I write multiple drafts of it. I work with an editor on it. I try to ask advice of other writers. And everybody's just like, I don't get the point of this article. And I'm like, I don't know if I even have a point. So, at the end of the week, I ended up talking to my producer and just saying, I think we need to shelve this article. I don't think it's good enough to publish. We ended up publishing the interview that we recorded on YouTube with terrible sound quality. It got less than 200,000 views on YouTube, which for us, for the channel that we had and the potential of the project, it was kind of a major failure. And I think to this day, most of the top comments on the YouTube video are like, why is the sound so bad? And this was like this really painful experience. But it was also during this experience that I learned what was maybe the most important lesson of creating great content that I could have learned at that time. And it was this. It was that you can have the best idea, the best concept, the best opportunities for content, but none of that on its own is going to lead to really great content if you personally don't care about it. Another way of thinking about this is you need to make sure that when you're writing content, you are actually following your passion, not just writing, what you think you should be writing. So my name is Dave Priest. Jason did a quick introduction of me at the beginning, but I have kind of an unusual role here at AWS. I'm a content producer and a storyteller. And practically, that means I help a lot of people create better content. I've worked with plenty of people on the DevRel team to come up with cool video scripts and blog posts. I've helped draft keynote addresses for executives, and I've helped develop broader kind of content strategies for cross-team initiatives. But I haven't actually done a whole lot of external facing work in the past year or two, which was kind of odd because I came from a world where I was publishing stuff, at least once or twice a week. So, I was really excited when Jason asked if I could lead one of these sessions for community builders, especially because I really truly believe that building content is one of the best ways to grow yourself personally and professionally in today's world. So today I'm going to offer a practical guide to building better content. But I want to do it in a little bit of a different way from usual. I want to do it by telling some stories about the experiences that I've had building content and some of the lessons that I've gotten from those stories. So building better content. I mean, even that title though, I waffled on whether I should use this subtitle of building better content, because that language of better, better or worse, good or bad, it's kind of difficult language, right? Like it raises this question of what is quality, what is good, or what is bad. I imagine that if I asked 5 people on this call what makes a blog post, for instance, good or high quality, I'd probably get 5 different answers. We use this language of quality, but it's slippery. It's hard to define, and it's even harder to measure. If you look at the movie Barbie, what defines its quality? Is it the Rotten Tomatoes score or the Metacritic score? Is it the audience score or the box office? Because really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it all just comes down to money. Well, maybe. Or maybe you think that all of those metrics are wrong and actually Barbie is a terrible movie. I don't know. Well, I want to propose for us a slightly more actionable definition. So this is my definition for high quality content, and that is high quality content reaches and meets the needs of its audience. I don't think this is the best or the only definition of high quality content, but when we're creating content online, this is a really useful definition. So it doesn't depend on an abstract idea of quality or on metrics that we can't really know before publication. Instead, it's focused on audience need. I use need here intentionally because it's different from want. In storytelling, we differentiate between a character's wants and needs partly by identifying which one the character is aware of. In other words, I know what I want, but I don't always actually know what I need. For any Disney fans out there, The Princess and the Frog gives one of the best examples of the differences between wants and needs. Tiana wants to open her restaurant, but she needs what else? True love. It's a Disney movie after all. There's literally a song in this movie, The Princess and the Frog, that's saying, these characters, they know what they want, but not what they need. The whole kind of satisfying discovery of the movie is Tiana coming to the realization that what she wants is not actually going to make her happy or fulfill her. What she needs is going to make her happy and fulfill her. You can also think about it with like gifts, since we're coming up on gift giving season. My wife and I often find it difficult to get gifts for each other because most of the small things we want, we can just, go out and get ourselves. But a great gift is one that the other person doesn't know they need, but when they open it, there's kind of a realization, or a recognition and understanding. They know that they've been seen and understood by somebody else, and that's part of what makes receiving a great gift, really really nice. It makes you feel understood and seen. As an example, my wife gets cold a lot and she has trouble sleeping. So a few years ago, although she'd never asked for a weighted blanket, I got her one, and it was a big hit. Why? Because I started with her problem, that she's cold and has trouble sleeping, and I worked backwards from that to identify a solution that I could then give to her. So over the years, I've written a lot of articles and stories, but one of the most successful things my team ever wrote, just in terms of readership, was right after COVID started. A lot of people were stuck at home, and we were asking ourselves what people's problems were. And, we were stuck at home too. So we were experiencing those problems as well. We ended up writing, a ton of different articles, from giving updates on vaccine development status, to interviewing air quality experts about how viruses travel through the air. The most popular article that I wrote during that time, though, was about Animal Crossing, the video game. I saw my wife playing it one day, and I realized, there are probably millions of people out there doing the same thing, because, we're all stuck inside. We're wanting to play something that's like comforting. This was spring of 2020, and it was just starting to warm up outside. It was the end of winter. This is normally a time when people go out, they get to spend time together, they get to enjoy nice weather, after a long winter. But instead, everybody was having to socially isolate. There was a lot of uncertainty about what the future looked like. This was early in the days of COVID, when we didn't know, what things were going to look like. There was the language of, is this the new normal? Um, and so people wanted something that was going to be comforting and kind of cozy and reassuring at this time. And so, I saw this and I was like, a lot of people would probably really like this. So I spent, I don't know, an hour or two writing a very brief article that was just, a couple of tips on Animal Crossing. And I posted it on a Friday, which you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to generally publish on Fridays, because, people are signing off for the week. I published it on a Friday, and I got millions of readers in just a few days, right? Now, this is my point. To write something that really resonates with people, one of the best things you can do is to try to understand those people first. What do they actually need that they don't even know that they need? What are the pain points that they don't even question anymore, because they just assume those pain points are never going to get better? And then how can you ease those pain points for them? Thinking more explicitly about it, we need to make sure when we're writing that we prioritize the needs of our audience over the wants of our audience. And that's how we're going to make content that really, really connects with people. All right, let's go back to our working definition for quality content. For any content to meet the needs of its viewers, which, we want it to do, first it has to reach them, right? And this is one of the big questions for content creators, especially for people who are new to content creation. How do you go from 50 viewers to 5,000, or from, 5,000 viewers to 5 million, right? Well, like I said, you need to understand your audience and their needs. So you should really spend time thinking about who you're creating for. But then you also want to think about how people are going to arrive at your content. And this part is really misunderstood by people outside of the media world, or at the very least, I think creators often under index on it. So, how do viewers arrive at your content? If you're talking about the internet, there's basically three ways that viewers find content. Okay. And this, I've found this to be a very helpful mental model for when I'm building content. So, one, readers either stumble upon content, they discover it, or they search it out, right? They have explicit demand for it, and then they search for it and they find it. Or finally, they navigate directly to that content. And usually this is something that they're doing periodically, right? That says stick content. That should say sticky content. My mistake there. So sticky content. This is stuff that people come back to again and again. It's sticky. It holds them there. Now, why does this matter? Why does it matter to sort of differentiate between how people arrive at content? Well, it actually makes a big difference in how you write content successfully. The kind of content that's going to be successful on social media, for instance, is actually going to be actively unsuccessful on a search engine and via direct navigation, and vice versa. In other words, to write successful content, you have to, in the words of Socrates, know thy content. Socrates didn't actually say that, but you get the idea. So let's talk about what kinds of content are going to be successful in each of these categories: discover, demand, and sticky content. Well, first is discover content. As the name implies, your audience isn't searching explicitly for discover content, they're stumbling upon it, right? So that means that discover content is often found on social media. It's shared on social media, right? Usually it's more time sensitive. Like some topics are going to be trending, and people who are going to write about trending topics, they're more likely to get picked up and kind of shared on social media. And often this is content that's exciting, it's new, it's unexpected. This is the kind of thing that people are not, it's not something that they're explicitly looking for. And so, if they're searching, if they're just sort of like scrolling on Twitter or something like that, or X, or, any social media platform, if they're just sort of scrolling, then part of what's going to get them to click on it is something that's going to be unexpected, something that they weren't looking for in the first place, but takes them in kind of an exciting new direction. And what's really not going to be compelling to people are things that are irrelevant to their lives, don't really have anything to do with their interests, or things that feel manipulative, that are kind of clickbaity, right? That seem like they're trying really hard to get you to click on it. So you don't, you want it to be unexpected, but you don't want it to be so sort of like begging for clicks that people feel manipulated. A really good example of this, I don't think anybody was Googling how to deploy Kubernetes using a 1986 Tandy computer, but I helped one of my colleagues, Darko Meserosh, write a piece on that topic a couple of months ago. And plenty of people read it and they shared it after discovering it on social media or in various newsletters online. This is a great example of something that was unexpected. It was inspirational, and so it was highly shareable. For Discover content, well, let me go back to this. For Discover content to reach builders, it has to be social media optimized, right? And its title has to catch readers' attention. Otherwise, people aren't going to click on it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Discover content specifically for new content creators. But in general, the way that I think about writing titles for Discover content is that they need to be really specific. They need to be unexpected. And often, it really helps if they're opinionated, right? Like if people are, if you have an opinion that you're wanting to share with people. So second piece of content, or second category of content we'll talk about, is demand content, right? Demand content is that content that people are explicitly searching for. Like they have a specific need, like, how to change the oil in their car, and they search for that phrase on Google or on specific, websites. If you want to find out how to change the oil on your car, you don't get on Twitter or on LinkedIn and scroll until you see somebody answer that question, because you're never going to find it, right? So instead, people are using search engines. So what that means is that they need to be optimized for search engines. And over time, because not everybody in the world needs to change the oil in their car at exactly the same moment, but many people will have to do it periodically over long periods of time. That means that over time, that content is going to be successful in more of like a kind of flat, predictable way, rather than with like big spikes that have to do with when topics are trending, right? Um, and for this content to be successful, it has to be clear and reliable, and educational, right? And the opposite is true, for things that are unsuccessful here. If it's inaccurate or unhelpful, people are often already searching for solutions to problems, so they're already a little bit frustrated. And if they go to content that's like inaccurate or unhelpful when they're searching for answers, it is going to make them even more frustrated, and that content is not going to be successful. So a good example of this would be something like, this piece that one of my colleagues wrote called "What is DevOps?" Super simple. Lots of people are searching for what is DevOps all the time on, on YouTube, as Jason mentioned, on YouTube, on Google, on other search engines, because it's just sort of an ongoing question that people will have when they get introduced to the industry. And so this is really simple. The title asks the question really straightforwardly, and then the article answers the question really straightforwardly. So for this content to reach people, it has to be search engine optimized. The title has to be super clear, right? It's not about grabbing attention. It's about being really, really clear. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to find it. Um, Now, writing demand content as individual content creators is actually really, really hard because indexing on search without developing good authority with like a platform is just extremely difficult. If you want to try, though, as an individual content creator, the best way is by identifying a common problem that doesn't have well-known solutions and then writing those pieces, like writing pieces that have really, really clear titles that reflect that problem and solution. Um, I don't know if she's on this call, but one of my colleagues, Jenna Pedersen, I can't say if she's on the call or not. There's way too many people here. But she had a blog that she wrote like years and years ago that did this kind of thing. And I think it was about regex, if I remember right. And it was just answering like sort of a like very kind of clear question that a lot of people had about that thing. And nobody else had really answered that question. And she put it on her own personal blog. And over the course of many, many years, it just did really, really well. People consistently were looking for it and consistently found her blog to be the best answer to that thing. So it really is possible as an individual content creator, even though it's difficult. So, I don't want to be discouraging there. The final content type that we're going to talk about is sticky content. So sticky content is the kind of content that people go to day in and day out. The most obvious examples would be things like social media platforms or games like Wordle, right? Um, but when it comes to written and video content, that also can be, very successful as sticky content. What it has to do, though, is it has to provide ongoing value. That because sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments. Um, it has to provide ongoing comment because ongoing value because people are going to continue going back to it over and over again and looking for that value. So games that have, a new scenario like Wordle every single day, they're a really easy win for sticky content. Written content and video content that's going to have people coming back is a little bit harder because it means that you have to be creating new content continually. Um, a really important element of it, too, is that it has to be shareable and social. Um, and when I say shareable and social, part of what I mean is the reason why people go to sticky content is not just because it's enjoyable and kind of a one-off experience, but because when they go there, they anticipate that other people are going to be there, right? That's why social media is such sticky content. And that's part of why, like Wordle, as an example, Wordle's not just a game that you play, but as soon as you finish playing Wordle every single day, the first thing that pops up is share your score with friends, right? And you can text it to people, you can post it on Twitter, you can do whatever, right? The whole point of sticky content is that it creates a social experience for people that they want to go back to again and again. And that means that for content creation, if you're creating things like newsletters, or like a Substack blog or something like that that you want people to be kind of going back to again and again, it's very important that you're not only addressing topics in a way that's compelling, but it also means that your personality has to be really embedded in the content. And it means that there need to be mechanisms for people to engage socially on that platform. So, practically, I would just say, if you're thinking about sticky content and trying to develop sticky content, this is a really, really big time investment, but it's also how you build communities over time. So, very challenging, but also very rewarding. Now, out of the three types of content, sticky content is is maybe the highest reward. I have friends who are journalists who have started, for instance, like Substacks, where they've just built. Let me give a specific example. I had a good friend who is a political reporter. He covered the presidential race back in 2016, and he lived in Indiana, and he happened to be in Indiana when Mike Pence was announced as the vice president for Donald Trump. And so he was somebody who had a lot of experience covering Mike Pence in local politics already. And so he got tapped by a bunch of different publications to cover Mike Pence's political run. So this sort of brought, this was a great opportunity for him, and he wrote a lot of really great coverage on this thing. But then he also started a Substack shortly after that that was just focused on Indiana politics, right? So this isn't aiming for a massive audience. It's aiming for kind of a narrow audience of people who are really interested in Indiana politics, but it's also an audience that doesn't get a whole lot of specific publications just dedicated to that area of interest. And so he started this Substack. It was $10 a month to read the Substack. He published something once a week on it, and the comments were really, really engaged. There was kind of a small community of people who were very politically interested in this, and so they got interested. They were very engaged. People were very present there every single week on everything that he was publishing, and he would often publish things like discussion questions too to start these conversations. And within a year or two, he had maybe 4 or 5 thousand people who were subscribed there. And I mean, you all can do the math. 4 or 5 thousand people who are subscribed, paying $10 a month, is a decent amount of money. He was making very, very good money by doing this, and he did it by creating that kind of sticky content that people wanted to be there for again and again. Every single week when he published things. Now, for content creators who are just getting started, I tend to recommend starting with discover content because the risks are a little bit lower and the time investment isn't super high, but the potential still is very high. So I was just chatting with another one of my colleagues, Victoria Semian, who has a pretty large following on social media, and she was talking about how it's often the small posts that are really spur of the moment ideas that actually do the best, not the huge time investments, but instead just sort of tactical experimentation over time. So discover content is perfect for that. It gives you an idea to just, it gives you opportunities to just throw out ideas, see what sticks, and go from there. So what's my lesson here? It's to write for reach, right? Don't just create content and then after you create the content, try to figure out how to distribute it. Be thinking about reach before you even start writing. Who is your audience? How can you understand them? But then also, how are they going to find your content? And then how can you optimize so they can find that effectively? Okay. I have written a lot of content over the years, as I mentioned, but I've also written a lot of types of content, right? I've written articles and blog posts, video scripts, stories, poems, screenplays, video game missions. For a couple of years, I was ghostwriting young adult fiction that was translated into a bunch of different languages. I've pitched movie ideas to like top executives at Paramount Pictures and other studios. And every single thing that I've written, regardless of whether it was successful or not in and of itself, every single one of those things helped me make the next thing better. Just as a quick example of this, at one point I was an on-camera consumer tech reviewer. I was supposed to do a review of a smart display from a certain company that I'll leave unnamed. Um, and this was the fourth or fifth smart display that they'd released in just a few years. It wasn't going to be like a super exciting topic. I knew that readers weren't like, just foaming at the mouth to get to this new smart display that was like an inch bigger than the previous smart display. But my experience writing screenplays gave me an idea, and that idea was to write a script where I would play multiple parts. So with a little bit of editing magic, I created a couple of versions of myself on screen to discuss the product that I was reviewing, and eventually to argue over it and then to fight over it later in the video. And what could have been like a really simple product review it ended up turning into a really fun kind of experimental video review that got a surprising amount of views. It got a lot more views than most of the content that I had written, and that I had shot on these kinds of topics in the past, even though the product itself wasn't as in high demand as other products that I'd reviewed. So, my point here is that the kind of approach that we take doesn't always pay off with viewership, but it does always pay off with personal growth. And over time, that personal growth is going to lead to more viewership. So, my fourth lesson for you today is just experiment. With any kind of content, experimentation is really, really valuable. That said, there is kind of a second element that goes with experimentation that I think is equally important, and it kind of helps counterbalance experimentation. Um, and that is feedback. There's a screenwriter that I like a lot who's named Paul Schrader. It's the guy on the left here. He wrote a bunch of movies like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, First Reformed, a lot of other great movies. I really like his writing a lot. And he has described his writing process like this. He basically says in a movie about 40 or 50 things happen. So he gets a piece of paper and he just makes a list of those 40 or 50 things on the piece of paper, right? Um, and then he finds a person to tell this story to. He takes his list, he goes, maybe he just goes to like a diner and he'll grab a waiter and he'll start telling the story to them. And as he tells them the story, just verbally, he watches them. And if he notices that they're getting bored, he makes a note on the piece of paper to tighten up that section, right? And if they seem really engaged at a certain part, he makes a note on that piece of paper to expand that section. And when he says, when they say that they have to go back to work, he makes a note of where they stopped listening. And he goes home and he rewrites the sheet of paper. And then he does this over and over until he can tell the story straight through to a stranger. And it's so compelling that that stranger will stand there for 45 minutes while he tells them this story. And he says once he can do that, he knows that he's got a good movie to write, right? What I love about this process is how iterative it is. Schrader experiments. He tries something new, right? The experimentation is really important, but he also creates a feedback loop that forces him to develop his initial clever idea into a fully fledged, finished product. A number of years ago, when I was working as a columnist at a publication, I had a lot of freedom to kind of write about whatever I wanted to write about. But I was on my way to work, and my car broke down, and I was stuck working out of a coffee shop for like 2 days while the repairs were done on this car. It was a terrible job. The transmission totally went out. It was like thousands of dollars, and I ended up actually having to take a loan to cover the repairs on this car that I owned. Um, and it just got me thinking about this idea of ownership and the nature of ownership in today's world. And as a tech journalist at the time, one of the things I thought about was data. When we think about ownership, I think data is sort of a natural question for a lot of people. And so I ended up writing a piece about data ownership. And I decided to do what Paul Schrader did with his script outlines. I was kind of inspired by him. And so I told the story of data ownership to random people. I asked people questions about it. People at the coffee shop where I was stuck. I went to my wife at home. I gave my parents a call, and just bounced ideas off of people to find what they really thought, and tried to tease those ideas apart. So the article that I wrote on data didn't end up getting read by many people. Maybe it was 20,000 people in all or something like that. It wasn't like huge numbers. But a few weeks later, I ended up being quoted at length in the New York Times on it. And then a former White House chief of staff ended up sharing my story. And then a couple weeks after that, I had a friend who is at Harvard Law School who messaged me, to say that she and a bunch of her classmates were reading and discussing my article in their Facebook group. And in that Facebook group were a bunch of Supreme Court clerks. And my point with this is that success doesn't always look the same. Like sometimes you're going to get millions of readers, sometimes you're only get you'll get a few thousand. But the readers, if you think about your audience carefully and you create the right feedback loop to give you the right data to develop your writing and kind of refine it in the ways that you want it to be refined, you can reach the readers that you want to reach. Your goals can be different, but regardless of what they are specifically, that feedback loop helps guide you to those goals. So this is my fifth lesson, and that is, just make sure that even as you experiment, that you also create a feedback loop for yourself to be able to help refine whatever content you are creating. Okay, what was, particularly challenging about that topic, privacy and data, one other element of it was dealing with the fact that there were a lot of people who should care about it, in my view, but many of them didn't actually understand why they should care. And this actually was a great challenge for me because I had to take this highly technical concept and find sort of the human story underneath it. And for you all too, I think that this is a challenge, right? We're often writing about concepts that matter deeply, but readers don't always understand why they matter or why they should care. So this, I guess, is the part of the presentation where I'm going to get like a little bit more personal, because I care deeply about content. Part of the reason why I shifted and, more fully into the tech world a number of years ago as a content creator is because of the emergence of generative AI. And specifically, it's because generative AI really reshaped a lot of the traditional media world in the past couple of years, and it's going to continue to do so. I saw, whole newsrooms that were getting laid off. I saw major publications just totally shut down, delete all of the articles that people had written over many, many years. I saw major publications, including one that I worked at, start publishing articles written by generative AI without labeling them. And I think overall part of the effect of this was that it started to kind of basically create like inflation for the value of content that people are creating online. Before generative AI, we were creating massive amounts of content online, but the volume of content, a lot of which was very, very low quality, was starting to balloon, and it's continuing to balloon in this way. So a colleague from a couple of years ago reached out to me recently, and he told me that he was freelancing. He's writing for various publications for a per article rate. And I asked him about generative AI and how it impacted him. And he complained a little bit about it. But then he told me something surprising. He said he's actually making more money than before because he started just giving his assignments to ChatGPT and then kind of minimally editing them and turning them into these publications for pay. Um, I'll be honest and say that I was really angry when I heard this. I was angry for two reasons. The first one is fairly straightforward. I think it's unethical to do that. Um, for publications to ask you to write an assignment and then to give them something that you didn't write is unethical. But the second thing was, because I think to me it revealed that we often have lowering standards for online content. There's a lot of creators who are content to churn out what may as well be AI generated content, because it just sort of does what they need it to do. It's content that lacks depth, that lacks reflection, that lacks intention and passion. Um, and so, I think that on some level, it's true that we're probably going to create very little in our lives that's completely new, right? Like there's a Christian doctrine that God created the universe ex nihilo, or out of nothing, but humans can't do that. We create ex creatio, or out of what's already been created. But we're different from generative AI in that we don't simply ingest data and then kind of rearrange it predictively like generative AI. We have idiosyncrasies, we have opinions and preoccupations and convictions, all of which fundamentally shape what we create. And it's these things that distinguish our content from what a large language model might generate. So, in short, it's the fact that behind each piece of online content is a human being. And the best bits of those content are actually the parts that reveal that human being, even if it's just a little bit. So, okay, I'm rambling a little bit. This might seem really abstract, but this idea that the humanity kind of behind our content is what makes it valuable is actually the idea that underlies everything that I've been talking about today. It's the reason why it's important to have an opinion, to be passionate about something. It's why you have to prioritize the needs of your audience over their wants. It's the reason why you should write for reach and think about how your audience is going to be reaching the content that you write. It's why it's valuable to experiment and iterate and grow over time. All of those things are valuable because at the end of the day, any content that you create is just you as one human being trying to connect with other human beings, whether that's through blog posts or videos or even just tweets. So, as long as you keep that humanity in mind, your own and that of your audience, the content you create can be personal and meaningful and insightful in a way that generative AI content simply by definition cannot be. So, here's my call to you all. Maybe as content creators who are just getting started, maybe as people who want to start creating content, or people who are even more established in creating it. Um, but success for creators doesn't look identical. But if you want to be successful in your own way, I think that these 5 tips are going to be very valuable to you. And I would add just one more to it, which is, I think it's important, yes, that you follow passions, yes, that you prioritize needs over your wants, over your audience's wants, yes, that you write for reach and you experiment and you create feedback loops, but most importantly, that you be human. Um, and those are my tips for you. So thank you all very much for your time. Um, I'm just going to add a really quick addendum to this, I guess, and then and then we can do some questions here. I just want to shout out that we also have a new platform that Developer Relations has been building for the AWS developer community called community.aws. I think that 1 or 2 people have mentioned it in the comments already. This platform is in super early development, but we're really excited to see it as a place where builders like you all can get online and start posting your own content. And last week at reInvent, we just had community contributions go live with the post editor. So you can get on, you can just like claim your profile, your account alias, and you can start posting. In the longer term, if there's appetite for it from community members, I'd love to do more kind of enablement work of this kind, helping to empower builders to create and share their content, the stuff that they're really passionate about for broader audiences. So if you want a really practical way to put the things I've talked about today into action, community.aws offers a platform to immediately do that. So I would highly recommend that you all do that. All right, and I'll stop talking now to take any questions.
All right, David, thank you. Awesome presentation. That was even better than the one you gave to the DevRel team. So thanks for adding all that additional info. We did have a couple of questions in the comments, so I'm just scrolling through here. There was one from Lalit early on. And it says, should we have some exposure and assess the SEO aspects for the title of the content? If so, can you share some pointers which could be helpful?
Yeah, sure. So SEO is really valuable specifically for demand content, so for things that people are searching for. And like I mean, there's a lot of SEO tools that are out there, but honestly, I think um, the easiest thing to do is to just look at like Google, is it Google Trends? I think that's it, right? Google Trends, you can just search, like you can just look up search volume for different terms, and that gives you it gives you stuff that's like very, very practical, like, are people searching for like is generative AI a more popular search term, or are large language models a more popular search term? So you can do side by side comparisons to see like, oh, this is actually the thing that people are searching for a lot more. And then you can adjust your content, like the titles that you use, and subtitles and things like that to make them reflect that more fully. Um, and also there's other tools within that where you'll see on that page with Google Trends, you'll see like what are associated queries that people use, what are associated keywords that people use. You can take all of that and just help to like it that all of that data basically just helps you calibrate your content a little bit to make sure that like the title is as good as it can be for search, the subtitle, the first paragraph, if you're able to access metadata, other things like that. There's a lot of ways that you can improve SEO. Also, I think it's worth saying that like that SEO is not like fully solvable because algorithms are being changed like pretty routinely by search engines. And so like you don't want to you don't want to I don't know. I guess I would just say like you don't want to over-index on just gaming SEO because ultimately the purpose of search engines algorithms is to kind of find and surface high quality content. So it's going to be a lot more valuable to build really high quality content that's responding to kind of real genuine user need than it is going to be to like try to game all of the little, SEO metrics. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I would say it does. Nico has a question on this, kind of a tricky one. It's essentially just about audience. What are the best platforms to reach the audience? Medium, LinkedIn, Substack, dev.to, community.aws. How do you find content as a content, or sorry, audience as a content creator?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of it is by well, let me give two answers to that. I think that there's two parts to it. One is, it's doing research and trying to find where people are. You'll find, surprisingly thriving sub communities on, like Reddit or on Medium or different places like that. And so finding those and being kind of cognitive of those things and then using them, so like if you're publishing, say, on community.aws or on Medium or something like that, if you publish like a longer form piece and you know that like there's a subreddit that has a really good like a really vibrant active community that's interested in this subtopic that you're talking about, posting that Medium post on that subreddit is going to be a really great way to sort of tap into those audiences. Now, not all of those platforms are built for you to develop your own kind of your own personal platform. So, Medium does that better than like Reddit. You don't have like people that you're following on Reddit in quite the same way. So to some degree, it's important to kind of build your own platform wherever you choose to do it. And that's going to be on places like LinkedIn, like Medium, like community.aws, platforms where you can like actually have a profile and content that's associated with your profile, or like YouTube or Twitch if you're doing video.
We have a question here from Nandini, and they say, "What are techniques to create the feedback loop?" So I think this was in
Mm.
relation to the example of the storyteller, talking to the waiter. So I'm not sure if you have any advice there for technical content creators.
Yeah, so YouTube has great built-in metrics where you're able to just sort of see, you're able to see how much people are watching. You're able to see like click-through rate. You're able to see all kinds of metrics there that are really useful. And what's important is to kind of identify what each metric is actually giving you, like what signal it's giving you. So for instance, if you get like, if you're able to see the CTR, the click-through rate on YouTube, and your CTR is like really low for a given video, that's not telling you that the video is bad because people aren't watching it. It's telling you that, there's something about the title or the thumbnail that's not connecting with people when they see it and getting them to click on it. Um, I know that Medium and Substack and some of these other places also have um, built-in metrics. A lot of social media at this point does as well, like Twitter and LinkedIn. You can track what viewership is, what the total engagements are, what the impressions made are, those kinds of things. And again, I think the tricky part is not getting those metrics. It's more uh, interpreting those metrics properly and making sure that you know what signals they really are giving you and what to adjust to improve your content to get better performance, I guess, out of them.
Yeah, I'll add one other quick thought there, and that is, bounce rates or exit rates. So if you're creating content
Yeah,
on YouTube, and your exit rate's really high, it could be, your intro. It could be someone looking at the length of your video and going, "Oh, I just want a quick answer," and this video is 20 minutes long. So there are definitely signals you can optimize for as well.
yeah.
Carlton has a question about. They say, "What tools do you use to create video content?" I'm not sure if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can just show you. I like here. I use I use a Canon. This is just like a Canon. I don't even know what kind of Canon this is. Canon EOS something. Uh, M50 Mark II is what this is. Um, but you can at like honestly at this point you can use an iPhone. Most new phones have better cameras than a lot of DSLRs that are out there. Um, and use a phone. There's a lot of apps. I use like Adobe. Uh, um, Man, I'm totally blanking. Uh, I use Adobe Premiere, thank you. Adobe Premiere for video, but there's a lot of like short form specific apps that are for like editing on your iPhone. I know, some of my colleagues like Victoria, Linda Haviv, and Brooke Jameson, some of my colleagues who do a lot of short form video, they actually just have apps on their phones that are really great for doing those kinds of short form videos, just like editing directly there.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here that are related about multiple content spaces. So one person says, does your content, or so does your audience prefer to engage in multiple content spaces like a blog page, Twitter and YouTube at the same time? And then Nandini says, is creating the same content in multiple blog platforms, does that increase reach? So do you have any strategies for, yeah, multi-platform, content reach? Not everyone might be familiar with the canonical link function, that allows you to publish it, which we now support in community.aws. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I mean, I think in general, what I would recommend against is just taking identical content and publishing it across multiple platforms, not because it's going to like damage, the platform or like the content itself, but because actually each of those platforms really like content that's optimized for each of those platforms is going to be marginally different, right? Like if I'm posting something on LinkedIn, I'm going to be using emojis in a way that if I publish something on like Medium, I'm probably not. And readers are going to be expecting those differences. So if I just take my Medium post and I post it on LinkedIn, not ideal. It's probably not going to get great returns. That said, there is a lot of value in basically creating kind of content packages. So when you publish like a Medium post or you publish something on community.aws, also publishing like a TLDR kind of thing on LinkedIn, and optimizing it for that platform, giving like a really nice 1 or 2 sentence hook at the top of the LinkedIn post and then linking to your community.aws sort of base post, creating videos on YouTube and being able to interlink. The more you have stuff that's interlinking and sort of supporting each other, it actually adds more kind of search authority to that content. So it's going to strengthen that content like overall if you do release stuff in kind of packages in that way.
Yeah, I'll add one other quick thing here. We have a lot of community builders that publish on their personal blogs, and then they publish the same article on our dev.to organization. And what's really interesting is that because Google loves dev and our organization, there's a lot of gravitational pull just for organic search. So sometimes it's, yeah, going where your audience is and finding, the places where you can get the most reach. I think we have
Yeah.
one other question here. Time for one other question here. Peter has one that says, thanks, Dave, for your time. Would you say it's best to create demand content on an established domain, such as community.aws, rather than, say, a domain that I registered recently?
I mean, in general, I would say yes. I think demand content is going to benefit a lot more from having the built-in search authority of the platform. Uh, yeah, that would be my answer. I would say in general, I don't want to discourage you from publishing things like demand content on your own blog. Uh, because it is possible to do that well. It's just a lot harder for it to be successful.
Makes sense. Oh, there's a couple other things that popped in at the last minute. Right, Zapier publishing on both. Do you know how we can check if we are shadow banned from some social media platforms? That's a tricky one.
I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. I would just get a different, account and look
Right, right.
to see, but I don't know. That's
Yeah.
my best advice.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this session. David, thank you for the amazing presentation and for spending extra time with us. So, everyone, we're going to wrap up here. We're going to stop the recording. This video will be shared in our Slack workspace. David, thank you for your time. Thank you for attending, everyone, and have a great morning, evening, or afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you all.